Hi everybody, and welcome to my next video in this series about my new game Battle for Antares, which I'm going to release in a couple of weeks on Steam. As you probably know, in this series I would like to walk you through all the game components, how everything works under the hood, how the game is made up, all the design choices that I've made, all the mistakes that I've made probably. In already the two last videos I was discussing the artificial intelligence, so how the computer knows how to play the game, how it makes this decision about what economy or infrastructure project it needs to build on the planets, and how it's making tactical decisions where to move his fleet. And in this last video I would like to discuss how the AI evaluates its own chance to win and uses that to decide whether it wants to forfeit the game. That mechanism is mainly in there to make sure that once you as the player has gained a significant advantage, you don't need to completely play out the game and invade all the planets, but the artificial intelligence is forfeiting. And this, as you can imagine, can be dangerous, because if it forfeits too early, then it could give up a game which it could win. So that could be very disappointing to the player, or seem very confusing. And on the other hand, if it forfeits too late, then this mechanism doesn't really make sense. Yeah? So it's a bit tricky to tune that properly. But I think I have found a reasonable compromise, and essentially in this video I would like to show you how that works. So in this AI debug window, which I have presented last time, I can always see the win chance here. So currently the AI is giving itself a 50% chance to win, slightly increasing, and the second number here is essentially the threshold, which the if the win chance falls below that particular threshold, then it would start to think about forfeiting. This forfeiting is essentially just a counter which raises the longer you stay below the threshold, and if it then exceeds or it reaches 10, then essentially we would forfeit. Yeah? So that's the basic mechanism, and now I would like to show how that works internally, how that is calculated. Probably from last time you remember this in the AI class, this repeat function, which is executed every 3 seconds, and is used for the AI to make decisions. And one of the things which happens here is that we evaluate this win chance, and also whether we want to forfeit or not. So this is happening every 3 seconds, okay? And the evaluation of the win chance itself is essentially done by comparing empire resources. So the AI compares its own resources to the player, and uses that to determine a chance. And so this as you can see here, I have this this function single win chance, and it gets the fleet size of the AI, and also the fleet size of the player empire. It gets food, and food of the player empire. It gets the current production, so the total industry points that you generate, and the total industry points of the player. Then also the money per turn that we generate versus the money per turn of the player, and also the science generation. Yeah? And it gets these kind of offsets and these importance values. And within that function, essentially what happens is I compare the resources that my own empire generates versus the resources that the enemy, in this case the player, generates, and just divide that. So just calculate the ratio. So if both of them generate the same amount of resources, like the player has 10 industry and the AI has 10 industry, then essentially that would be a 50% win chance. But if you have like double the amount, like you have 10 industry, the AI has 10 industry and the player has only 5, then it would be 10 over 15, so that would be 2/3 win chance, something along those lines. Yeah? And then there comes this offset into play, which is just adding up to, so I'm just adding up to this offset amount to the resources, just to compensate for the very beginning, to make this function a bit more balanced. And to make sure that if you are like, say you have only one science point and the other has 2 science point, then probably the total difference is not so much, but it would make up a 2/3 win chance, and that's something I don't really want. So I have this offset here, which allows me to control how rapidly this kind of ratio reacts. And then I have this importance value, which I just use to I just raise this ratio here to that power. And the reason why I'm doing that is that eventually what I want to do is I want to calculate a geometrical mean of all these individual win chances. So here we have an individual win chance based on the fleet size, and that means the more fleet size you have, the AI has compared to the player, the higher the win chance. Or if the player's fleet exceeds the AI fleet, then the win chance would drop, and so on and so forth. And eventually I want to take the geometric mean of these values. So I just multiply all of them. All of them are already raised to their respective importance values. This allows me to control how important these individual values are overall. So I have these importance values here, which I've just tuned to make it reasonable. For example, your fleet size is more important than science or food, for example. Yeah, so that's just the basic idea here. Now I just multiply all of them, and then I just raise them to the to 1 over the sum of all these importance values. That's just giving me the geometrical mean, and I've chosen the geometrical mean because what I wanted to achieve is that if either one of these, or essentially I want to over exaggerate low win chances essentially. So when either one of them is 0 or very close to 0, then that will pretty much dominate this kind of product here and pull this overall win chance down to 0. So it is for the AI, technically it is sufficient for the AI to completely lose in one of these fields. So if the AI would generate 0 signs, if it were not for this offset, then a single value of this could make the AI forfeit, but I do have these offsets in here, so that's never actually going to happen. But this geometrical mean is essentially over exaggerating low win chances, which is an effect which I wanted to achieve here. Okay, so now what is left to do essentially is to after I've calculated this win chance here, what is left to do is I just need to compare the win chance to this. I just need to compare it to the current threshold. Yeah. So if the win chance is lower than a certain threshold, then I just start to forfeit. This is essentially happening above here. So I'm just comparing that to this current win chance threshold, and if that's the case, then I would increment this forfeit counter. The forfeit counter starts at 0, and it would be incremented when the win chance is below the threshold, and it would be decremented if the win chance is above that. So it just goes between 0 and 10, and if it then has reached 10, and if the counter has reached 10, and if we have not yet forfeited, then essentially we forfeit, and remember that in the game state. I can show you that later. But what is left to do is to determine this current win chance threshold. So what is the threshold? And this is the threshold itself is not fixed. What I wanted to avoid is that due to some circumstances in the very early game, the AI forfeits too early. So what I do is I take the game duration and I compare that to a fixed forfeit delay, which is currently 300 seconds, so 5 minutes. And I just use that to slightly increase the threshold. The threshold starts at 0, so you cannot possibly be, your win chance cannot possibly be below 0, so you're never going to forfeit. And then I'm slightly increasing that to this win chance threshold, which is currently 30%, over time. So after 5 minutes, this threshold will reach 30%, and before that it will gradually increase towards that threshold, and that makes it less likely for the AI to forfeit in the early game. But after 5 minutes, everything is settled, and then this 30% win chance is the threshold which is used. So if you manage to bring down the evaluated win chance here, or essentially here this geometric mean below 30%, then the AI will start to forfeit. And if it does so 10 times in a row, remember this is called every 3 seconds, so it's going to take another 30 seconds to reach the full counter saturation here, but then essentially the AI would forfeit. And what happens in here is pretty straightforward. So we are just creating the respective widget which indicates to you that the AI has forfeited, and then setting some internal states. So I'm setting this forfeit state here internally to then let you, when you end the game, remember that the AI has forfeited, so you win. So essentially the logic is pretty straightforward. If you quit the game and the AI has not yet forfeited, then you lose, but if it has forfeited, then you win. Pretty simple. So what is left to do now with respect to artificial intelligence is to evaluate the drone production, and there essentially, I don't want to go into too much detail here for some gameplay reasons, but essentially what I do here is I calculate some optimal distribution. So what would be the optimal distribution of your different drone types that the AI has available, and then the AI is just trying to always reach that optimal distribution. And I don't want to discuss in too much detail what that optimal distribution is, because I want you to find that out by yourself, right? Okay. And then the only thing which is left with respect to the AI now is to also quickly discuss technology, because the AI also needs to choose technologies all the time, but there, quite frankly, there's not really any magic in here. So this just that whenever the AI has researched a technology, it's when the AI is created and started, then it picks one new technology to research, and then whenever one technology is researched, it just picks a new one, and this picking is essentially just a random pick. Yeah, so I just iterate over all the technologies that I could pick from, so that, remember, the AI has only these 3 technologies that it can pick from, and then it just does a random pick of any one of these. So that's pretty much it. Okay, so I think that's enough for now. That's how the artificial intelligence works under the hood. If you have any more questions, something else which is unclear, something which you would like to discuss, then shoot a message, leave the comment down below. I'm sure I can focus some videos on that as well. Until then, thank you very much for listening, and see you next time. Goodbye.